The year is 1944. The air smells of diesel, rain, and the sour tang of cordite drifting from the front. Somewhere beyond those hedgerows, General Patton's Third Army is devouring miles of French countryside, but its stomach is empty. Gasoline, the lifeblood of a mechanized war, is running out. And back in the shattered halls of occupied France, German staff officers sit around a captured map table, amused. The Americans, one colonel sneers, cannot fight without breakfast. Their tanks drink like oxen. Their army moves only as far as its kitchen can reach. Laughter echoes off stone walls. To the Wehrmacht, U.S. soldiers are overfed, over-equipped, and over-reliant on machines they barely understand. Germany's generals, forged in the lean school of scarcity, believe the Allies' vast abundance will collapse under its own weight. Logistics, the dull art of moving food, fuel, and bullets, is, in their minds, America's Achilles heel. They were wrong. Because in the final months of 1944, a miracle of movement would thunder across Europe, a river of trucks without precedent pulsing day and night. A supply chain born not of privilege but of desperation. It would turn laughter into disbelief and disbelief into defeat. It would be called the Red Ball Express. A war of motion. By August 1944, the Allies had broken out of Normandy. Operation Cobra had torn open the German front, and Patton's Third Army, newly unleashed after months of frustration, began what historians would later call the fastest pursuit in modern warfare. His tanks lunged forward, consuming 400 miles in a matter of weeks. But there was one problem. Every Sherman, every half-track, every Jeep ran on the same thing: fuel. For each armored division, more than 350,000 gallons of gasoline were needed per day. At that pace, Patton's spearheads could not survive on captured depots or erratic pipelines. The French rail network was shattered by Allied bombers. Bridges lay in ruins. Roads were cratered and mined. To the Germans watching from their bunkers, this overextension looked fatal. They saw the American army as a beast that had outrun its own heart. "Let them come," a general in the 5th Panzer Army remarked. "They will stop when the petrol stops." But what the Germans did not yet grasp was this: America had built not just an army but an industrial organism. Its soldiers were the flesh, its trucks the arteries, its fuel the blood, and when the heart faltered, ordinary men would become the pulse that kept it alive. The birth of an artery. Somewhere near St. Lo, in the chaos of August 1944, U.S. logisticians gathered around a map littered with pushpins and grease smudges. The ports were clogged, the rails gone, the depots miles behind. Supplies were stacking up on the beaches of Normandy, unreachable to the men who needed them most. The order came from General Dwight D. Eisenhower himself: keep Patton moving, whatever it takes. So they invented something new. A single, continuous convoy route. 700 trucks at a time, 24 hours a day, shuttling between Cherbourg and the forward fuel dumps in France. Each truck marked with a red ball, a simple symbol painted bright on the hood and bumper, that meant one thing: priority passage. Civilian traffic cleared the way. Military police waved them through crossroads without pause. This would be no ordinary supply line. It would be a highway of endurance. 5,000 trucks, 23,000 drivers, 6 million gallons of fuel a day, moving in ceaseless rotation. The Red Ball Express was born not from command but from chaos, built by engineers and logisticians who refused to accept paralysis. Among them were thousands of African-American soldiers, many denied combat roles, now handed the nation's most vital mission: feed the front or lose the war. They drove night and day, under blackout regulations, headlights covered, guided only by convoy markers and instinct. Trucks rolled through rain and fog, over bomb-scarred bridges, past burning villages. Sleep came in stolen minutes. Tires exploded. Engines overheated. But the line never stopped. If a truck broke down, another pushed it. If a bridge collapsed, engineers laid a new one before dawn. The enemy's irony. To the Germans, logistics was a chessboard. To the Americans, it became jazz, improvised, relentless, unstoppable. While German divisions were starving for fuel, rationing every liter of gasoline to tanks and trucks, the Red Ball Express transformed highways into veins of fire and sound. By late August, Patton's Third Army was refueled, rearmed, and roaring eastward again. Villages liberated by sunrise saw columns of Shermans rolling past by noon. French civilians cheered, waving flags and tossing flowers onto the windshields. In the wake of that movement, every German commander understood: this was not luck. This was system. "The speed of the American advance," wrote a stunned German staff officer in his diary, "defies reason. Their fuel comes from nowhere. Their roads are alive. In Berlin, Hitler raged that the Americans were wasting machines, blind to the irony that it was precisely those machines, and the invisible web sustaining them, that made them unstoppable. A theater of contrasts. At its core, the Red Ball Express was a story of contradictions. On one side, German generals who had perfected tactical brilliance, lightning attacks, discipline, and cunning, but now trapped in the slow death of supply starvation. On the other, an American war machine powered not by aristocratic officers or rigid tradition, but by mechanics, truckers, and engineers, ordinary citizens turned miracle workers. To the Wehrmacht, logistics was housekeeping. To the Americans, it became an art of war. The laughter of German officers, once full of contempt for soft, American soldiers, now turned to disbelief. How could a nation of civilians fight a war at industrial speed? How could a supply line be so vast, so flexible, that even when bombed, it rerouted itself in hours? Patton understood. "My men can eat their belts," he once said, "but my tanks have got to have gas." His genius was not only in command, but in recognizing that courage without logistics was suicide. And so the Red Ball Express became his blade. The rhythm of the machines. Imagine it, endless motion. Convoys stretching from horizon to horizon. Each truck a heartbeat. Each driver a lifeline. The rumble of GMC 2.5-ton trucks shook the countryside. Dust rose like ghosts along the road. In the distance, artillery thunder blended with engines. Radios crackled with short, urgent calls. "Convoy Charlie 6 to lead dog, we're losing pressure. Keep rolling, soldier. We stop, the front stops." There was music in that sound, the percussion of war industry at its purest. Men sang to stay awake, shouted jokes over the roar of engines, swore at potholes, prayed at dawn. Some never came back, ambushed, overturned, or lost in the dark. But still the road pulsed with life. This was more than logistics. It was a movement, a river of endurance carrying the soul of an army. The turning irony. When Germany finally realized what it faced, it was too late. Their laughter had turned to a grim respect. Intelligence reports admitted that the Americans have achieved a level of motorized supply we cannot equal. For every division they tried to stop, 3 more rolled forward. The same tanks that should have been stranded by lack of fuel were now roaring across the Seine, across the Marne, toward the very borders of the Reich. The Germans had built their doctrine on blitzkrieg, lightning war, but by autumn 1944, it was the Americans who carried the lightning. The moral core. The Red Ball Express was not elegant. It was dirty, improvised, exhausting, a triumph of grit over glamour. But within its roar lay a lesson as timeless as war itself. That victory does not belong only to those who fight on the front lines, but to those who keep them alive. Behind every tank charge, every liberation, there was a driver gripping the wheel, eyes burning from fatigue, whispering to himself, "Keep it moving." And in that movement, history itself shifted. Because while German generals laughed at the Americans' love of machinery, it was those very machines, and the men who refused to let them stop, that broke the spine of the Reich. In the end, the story of the Red Ball Express is not just about fuel or trucks or speed. It is about faith, the kind of faith that keeps an exhausted soldier driving through the night because he believes someone at the front is waiting for him. It is about how a nation's strength lies not in its arrogance, but in its ability to turn chaos into rhythm, necessity into invention, and laughter from the enemy into the sound of engines that will not die. So when the world remembers the thunder of Patton's advance, the liberation of France, the race to the Rhine, it must also remember the unseen army that made it possible. They were the pulse beneath the steel. They were the road itself. August 1944. The Allies had done the impossible. They had stormed Fortress Europe, cracked Hitler's Atlantic Wall, and forced the Wehrmacht into retreat. From the hedgerows of Normandy to the plains of Chartres, the German front was in tatters. Patton's Third Army, newly unleashed, moved like fire. But even fire needs fuel. Each Sherman tank guzzled 3 gallons per mile. Each armored division consumed 400,000 gallons a day. Artillery shells, spare parts, rations. Every bullet and bandage had to move forward over ruined roads. The Allied beachhead at Cherbourg, the nearest port, was over 300 miles behind the advancing front. The planners in Supreme Headquarters, Allied Expeditionary Force, SHEF, knew the math. Without rail lines or functioning ports, the advance could stall in days. And it nearly did. Patton's tanks reached the outskirts of Argenton, then hesitated, not because of enemy fire, but because the fuel trucks were still hours away. Mechanics siphoned gasoline from jeeps to feed the tanks. Crews rolled barrels by hand across fields. Drivers fell asleep at the wheel. The broad front strategy, Eisenhower's vision of advancing all Allied armies together, was devouring supplies faster than ships could unload them. Piles of fuel drums sat idle on the beaches, while at the front, the world's most powerful army was starving for motion. Inside the German command, disbelief turned to scorn. "Americans fight with bellies, not hearts," muttered General Gunther Blumentritt. "Cut the belly and they will stop." To the Wehrmacht, logistics were invisible, a servant of strategy, not its master. But to the Americans, something new was dawning. Victory would belong not to the army that fired the most bullets, but to the one that could feed its own momentum. The birth of the Red Ball. In late August 1944, General John C. H. Lee, commander of the Communications Zone, COMZ, as soldiers called it, was handed an impossible order: keep Patton moving. Lee was a bureaucrat with the soul of a logistician, a man who could turn tonnage into poetry. Under his command, a group of quartermasters, engineers and motor transport officers gathered in a tent near St. Lo. Maps covered in red pins showed a desperate truth. The roads were chaos, the rails dead, the depots bursting with unused supplies. Someone proposed a simple, radical idea: a continuous convoy system, one route in, one route out, no stops, no detours. Trucks would move like a living organism day and night, in endless circulation. Major General Frank Ross christened it after the U.S. railroad term for express cargo, Red Ball. The first trucks rolled out on August 25, 1944. Painted on their bumpers was a red circle, a symbol of urgency and privilege. Signs marked Red Ball route, authorized vehicles only. The system stretched from the ports of St. Lo and Cherbourg to forward depots near Chartres and Versailles, a 700-mile loop, divided into two main highways, Route A for outbound supplies, Route B for returning empties. Military police enforced strict control. Civilian traffic was banned. Rest stops were replaced by mobile repair units and field kitchens. Drivers carried spare tires, rations, and orders to keep rolling no matter what. Within days, the route was pulsing with motion. "You didn't stop," recalled Private Elijah Mitchell, a driver from Alabama. "You slept in the cab, ate out of a can, drove until your eyes blurred. We called it hauling freedom." More than 6,000 trucks joined the circuit within a week. Their cargo, fuel, ammunition, food, medical supplies, everything an army needed to keep fighting. The turning point. By early September 1944, the Red Ball Express had become a miracle of coordination. From dawn to dusk, and long after, convoys of GMC Deuce-and-a-half trucks thundered down narrow French roads, carrying over 12,000 tons of supplies daily. Each truck carried about 5 tons, and the entire operation ran on a 24-hour rotation. One convoy outbound, another inbound, one always loading, one always unloading. The road itself became a character, a living artery made of dust, sweat, and engine oil. Drivers were forbidden to travel alone. Convoys of 50 to 100 vehicles moved under the command of a convoy commander in a jeep. Radio discipline was strict. A single breakdown could paralyze miles of movement. Yet despite breakdowns, weather, and enemy aircraft, the line never died. At one point, an entire bridge over the Sarthe River was blown by retreating Germans. Engineers built a pontoon replacement within 6 hours, and by dawn the trucks were moving again. Fuel depots operated under blackout, refueling engines by feel. Mechanics worked in the rain, cursing the mud, patching radiators with chewing gum and prayer. And among the tens of thousands who made it work were men who, before the war, had been told they didn't belong. Nearly 75% of Red Ball drivers were African American soldiers, members of segregated quartermaster battalions. Denied frontline combat, they became the backbone of the operation. "They told us we'd never see action," said Corporal Henry Thornton. "But when you're driving 60 miles an hour with 5 tons of gasoline and shells, through sniper country, that's action enough." They drove under constant threat. German fighter bombers strafed convoys, snipers picked at bridges, accidents claimed hundreds of lives. Yet their courage remained largely invisible to history. Every night as Patton's tanks roared east, the Red Ball kept feeding them. Each mile they advanced meant more trucks, more fuel, more sacrifice. Without it, Patton admitted, "My tanks would be tin statues." The confrontation. By September 10, 1944, the line stretched to the breaking point. The Allies were now deep in France, pushing toward Belgium and the German border. Every mile further strained the Red Ball system. Reports poured in: tires shredded by gravel roads, engines failing, drivers collapsing from exhaustion. Colonel Loren Ayres, head of Motor Transport Command, issued a grim memo. "We are at the limits of endurance. Yet the front demands more." Still they pushed on. To save time, drivers overloaded trucks beyond safe limits, doubling loads, driving 20-hour shifts. Maintenance crews stripped wrecks for parts. The Germans, stunned by the relentlessness of the American advance, scrambled to adapt. Intercepted radio transmissions revealed disbelief. The Americans move faster than their own supplies, and yet their supplies never cease. In one of the war's bitter ironies, German intelligence initially dismissed the Red Ball Express as a temporary stunt. By the time they realized it was an entire logistical system, the Allied spearheads were already at the Moselle River. The enemy's laughter had turned to silence. The human element. September 1944, near Chartres. Night. Rain. Convoy headlights dimmed by blackout covers. Mud splashes up the sides of trucks like blood. The radio crackles with tired voices. Charlie 3 to lead dog. Fog ahead, we're blind as moles. Roger that, Charlie 3. Keep it tight. Don't stop for nothing. In the back of one truck, a photograph of a woman and child flutters under the dashboard light. The driver hums softly, keeping time with the rattle of the engine. Private Willie James writes a quick note on a scrap of paper. "Dear Mom, if I don't make it, tell them I was part of something big. We made history move." By the end of the Red Ball Express's 81-day run, more than 23,000 drivers had transported over 412,000 tons of supplies, fuel that powered the liberation of Paris, the crossing of the Seine, and the approach to Germany itself. Nearly 40% of the trucks were wrecked or worn beyond repair. Dozens of drivers were killed in accidents, air attacks, or ambushes. Yet the line held without interruption for nearly 3 months. When the Red Ball Express was finally disbanded on November 16, 1944, its mission complete, it had moved enough supplies to fill a train 800 miles long. Consequences and legacy. The Red Ball Express transformed more than the battlefield. It rewrote the very idea of warfighting. Before 1944, logistics had been the shadow of strategy, invisible, thankless, necessary. After 1944, it became the weapon itself. Patton's advance across France remains one of the fastest in modern military history, 400 miles in less than a month, made possible only by that rolling artery of trucks. The operation also shattered myths within the U.S. Army. It revealed that African American troops, long relegated to menial roles, could perform under the harshest conditions with brilliance and bravery. Their success became a quiet but powerful argument for integration, a legacy that would echo into the civil rights movement a decade later. From a technological standpoint, the Red Ball Express pioneered innovations still used today: route marking systems, traffic control networks, convoy discipline, and rapid repair engineering. Modern military logistics, from Vietnam to Iraq, traces its lineage directly to those dust-choked roads of France. And beyond tactics there was something deeper, a moral reversal. The Germans, who once defined blitzkrieg as the marriage of speed and shock, were defeated by an opponent who had learned to sustain speed indefinitely. The laughter of their generals became the echo of a lost era, when arrogance could not imagine adaptation. "Wars are won by logistics," General Eisenhower later said, "before a single shot is fired." He was right. The Red Ball Express proved that power in the modern world was not about who fired the first bullet, but who could keep firing the last. Reflection: the road beneath history. Picture the closing image, a French dawn, 1944. The war still raging in the east, but behind the lines, a single convoy rumbles past the ruins of a village. Children wave. A soldier leans out his window, tossing them a piece of chocolate. Dust rises. Engines fade. But the road remains. For a brief moment, that road carried the entire hope of the free world. Every drum of gasoline, every crate of ammunition, every exhausted driver holding the wheel, together they turned laughter into surrender. The Red Ball Express was more than logistics. It was proof that in war, and in life, motion itself can be an act of faith. It taught that progress isn't made by perfect plans, but by flawed men who refuse to stop moving. And it revealed something the German generals never understood: that power without humanity collapses, but humanity with purpose can move mountains, or an army, across a continent. War leaves its monuments in many forms: ruins, graves, statues. But some of its greatest legacies are invisible. The roads that fed victory, the hands that never fired a gun yet kept the guns firing. The Red Ball Express was one of those monuments, a living, moving testament to what human determination can do when every other system has failed. The road after the storm. By November 1944, the Red Ball Express had run its course. Patton's advance slowed near the Moselle River, and new supply routes took shape closer to the front. The great convoys dissolved. Trucks were reassigned, depots dismantled, road signs taken down. But something intangible lingered, a rhythm that had defined the heartbeat of an army. Many of the men returned home uncelebrated it. Their names rarely made newspapers, their heroism, buried under the weight of post-war triumphs. Yet for those who drove the road, the memory was eternal. "Sometimes when I close my eyes," said Sergeant Lewis R. Howard years later, "I still hear it, the hum of engines, the smell of gas and rain. We weren't famous, but we kept the world turning." The Red Ball Express did not just move supplies. It moved ideas, about equality, ingenuity, and endurance. It revealed that courage isn't only found in the charge of a tank or the crack of a rifle. Sometimes it lives in the steady pressure of a boot on a gas pedal, in a man refusing to stop despite exhaustion, darkness, or doubt. Legacy of motion. The success of the Red Ball Express changed how modern armies thought about warfare. Before 1944, logistics was considered the backstage of battle, the silent machinery behind the spotlight. After 1944, it became the center stage. When historians studied Patton's Blitz through France, they found not only daring tactics but the infrastructure that made them possible. 900 miles of marked routes, 6 million gallons of gasoline moved daily, 412,000 tons of cargo delivered in 81 days. Every statistic told the same truth. In a mechanized world, logistics was not a support system, it was the weapon itself. From that realization came the birth of modern military logistics doctrine, the foundation for how NATO and later the U.S. Army would move and fight across continents. The Red Ball's lessons lived on in Korea, where convoys supplied troops across frozen mountains, in Vietnam, where truckers braved ambushes on Highway 19, in Desert Storm, where precision logistics became the new face of dominance. And in every operation since, one phrase has echoed in training manuals and command briefings alike: keep them rolling. The forgotten soldiers. Yet beyond tactics and technology, there was another legacy, one written not in tonnage but in humanity. Nearly 3/4 of Red Ball Express drivers were African American. In an era when segregation defined the U.S. military, these men carried not only supplies but a silent burden of injustice. They were assigned the dirtiest, hardest, most dangerous work. They drove through enemy fire, slept in mud, fixed engines under blackout, and when they returned they were still denied entry to officers' clubs, still seated in the back of buses. And yet they did their duty with pride. "We didn't just prove we could drive," said technician 5th grade Robert Stackhouse. "We proved we could win a war." Their service, though rarely acknowledged at the time, became a seed that would grow in the decades that followed. The success of the Red Ball Express helped open military eyes to the potential of every soldier, regardless of color. It was a quiet rebellion, not of weapons but of excellence. When President Harry S. Truman signed Executive Order 9981 in 1948, officially desegregating the U.S. Armed Forces, the spirit of the Red Ball Express was there, humming beneath the ink. A moral irony. There is irony in how history turns. The German High Command, masters of efficiency, architects of blitzkrieg, once laughed at the Americans' dependence on logistics. To them, U.S. armies were clumsy giants, powerful but slow, rich but soft. And yet, it was precisely that softness, the abundance of food, fuel, and humanity, that became America's hidden weapon. Where German soldiers marched on starvation and fear, American convoys ran on coffee, gasoline, and belief. Where the Reich relied on control and cruelty, the Red Ball Express ran on improvisation and trust. That contrast revealed something profound, that efficiency without empathy leads to collapse, but endurance born of cooperation can move mountains. Hitler's empire crumbled under its own rigidity. The Red Ball Express, messy and imperfect, thrived on flexibility, on men solving problems faster than orders could reach them. The German generals had believed that discipline alone wins wars. The Americans proved that adaptability does. Human memory and the weight of roads. Decades later, the roads of Normandy are quiet again. The red signs are gone, the convoys dispersed into memory. But if you stand by the old route near Le Mans and listen closely, the wind still carries a faint echo, like the hum of tires on gravel, the ghost of motion. Every town they passed remembers something. A bar of chocolate tossed to a child, a convoy rumbling past a farmhouse, the sight of endless olive-drab trucks rolling east under banners of smoke and sunlight. To the people of France, those drivers weren't faceless logisticians. They were liberators. They were proof that freedom could move as surely as an army of tanks. One French villager interviewed years after the war put it simply: "We saw the trucks before we saw the end of fear. When the red ball came, we knew Germany was finished." Echoes in the modern world. Today, the principles forged by the Red Ball Express shape not only warfare but civilization itself. Every modern supply chain, every cargo ship crossing oceans, every relief convoy bringing aid to disaster zones, owes something to those roads of 1944. When hurricanes strike, when wildfires burn, when cities fall silent from crisis, it is logistics, the movement of fuel, food, and courage, that determines survival. The Red Ball Express stands as the ancestor of that resilience. It reminds us that civilization, like war, is sustained not by heroes and headlines, but by the unseen hands that keep the lights on, the engines turning, the people moving. It is the invisible miracle that keeps chaos from swallowing order. And in that sense, every highway, every airlift, every humanitarian convoy that follows a beacon through the night is a descendant of that one great artery across France. Reflections on human nature. There is a deeper truth beneath the machinery of it all. The Red Ball Express revealed that technology alone does not create power, human will does. It wasn't the trucks or the fuel that made it work. It was the men, ordinary, tired, underpaid, often overlooked, who refused to stop. They turned exhaustion into rhythm, fear into motion. When the engine started, one driver said, "We forgot everything, the rain, the danger, the road. There was just the sound and the job. You didn't think about dying. You thought about delivering." That spirit, the determination to deliver, is perhaps the purest form of courage. Because courage isn't only facing the enemy. It's facing monotony, fatigue, and futility, and driving through them anyway. In the end, the Red Ball Express wasn't just a road, it was a metaphor for humanity itself. A network of souls connected by duty, faith, and the stubborn belief that movement, any movement, is better than surrender. The road becomes a mirror. The camera fades to black and white archival footage. Convoys rolling through mist, soldiers waving from cab windows, Patton inspecting a truck line. Look closely and you see more than machines. You see the 20th century finding its identity, the moment when war became industrial and industry became human. The Red Ball Express marked the birth of the modern age, a world defined by motion, supply, and speed. From highways to the internet, from global trade to emergency relief, the principle is the same: survival depends on connection. The same roads that once carried fuel to the front now carry data across fiber optics, goods across continents, medicine across oceans. The convoy never truly ended. It just changed form. Sound builds again, faint engines in the distance. A single truck, restored and preserved, drives down a country lane in France, its olive paint gleaming in the sun. A red circle on its bumper catches the light. Children wave as it passes. The narrator's voice, soft and certain. Once, they said the Americans could not fight without breakfast. Once, they laughed at our engines, our abundance, our belief. But in the end, it was not steel or strategy that carried us to victory, it was motion. The will to keep going even when the road disappeared. Pause. They laughed at logistics. The Red Ball Express laughed last. History is full of irony, but its greatest lesson is always the same. Civilization moves forward because someone, somewhere, keeps it moving. From Patton's Blitz to the highways of today, progress depends not on the loudest voices, but on the quiet persistence of those who work unseen. The Red Ball Express reminds us that victory, in war, in peace, in life, is not a single act of triumph. It is the sum of countless small acts of endurance. So long as someone is willing to drive through the night, guided only by faith and a red circle on a road that leads toward freedom, the world will keep turning. Dedicated to the 23,000 men of the Red Ball Express, who kept the heart of an army beating. Engines hum once more, then dissolve into silence.